Bill Hartzer, and today we are with OnCrawl, and this is the SEO in Orbit webinar. Today we're talking about driving better rankings through UX, and which is really stands for user experience. I'd like to introduce Chris. Help me with, I'm going to probably screw up your name, but Giarratana.
Oh, you got it, man.
Strategy Beam, right?
Yep. Good to be here. Thanks.
Let's talk a little bit about what really, a little bit about your background, and I know that you're a digital marketing consultant at Strategy Beam. So give me a little bit, let's talk about your background and how you got into SEO and your previous experience and what you do now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got my start with SEO and online marketing when I went to University of Montana, and I started a nonprofit there. So I was working with really a $0 budget. So I had to teach myself everything from start to finish. And just during that time, I became really interested in just how to get more people to a website and how to convert those people. So it's been a really good journey along the way, and just self-taught. And since then, I've been able to help a lot of businesses in the area, make more money and increase their rankings.
Sure. What I've found over the years, I mean, I have to say it, but a lot of the really, really good SEOs and technical SEOs are actually, I tend to find they're a little bit more self-taught, and we've actually, made plenty of mistakes on the way. We've through our careers, but we've learned from those. It involves a lot of really just getting in there and doing the actual work and testing and see what works and what doesn't. The same thing with obviously a UX. I mean, it involves a lot of testing. Isn't that the case? I mean, we've got to test something and see how visitors respond and how conversions happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what's really interesting about this topic, is that it's really easy for me to go into a tool like Ahrefs or something, or Keyword Planner if I'm doing PPC, and in my head just have this great plan, and after testing it, you just find out it doesn't work. And that's what I think it's really cool when we start talking about user experiences. What's all the different ingredients that goes into that? So that's why I love this topic, and just really looking forward to kind of talking about that with you today.
Sure. I mean, based on my experience, actually comes down to, even we might have a topic for a blog post or even something that we change on our site, and we think it's really great and it's going to have a huge effect, and come to find out it actually doesn't. I mean, these blog posts and our content that we do, sometimes they really take off socially, and sometimes they don't, and there's not really any kind of rhyme or reason behind certain things interacting certain ways, but I have found that it comes down to testing and actually just making a change, whether it's making a change that that affects the user experience, or whether it's actually just a technical SEO change. How do you think technical SEO has an effect? I mean, do you think it has an effect on user experience?
Yeah, and really, like, it's all scary. I mean, whether you get caught up with your ego or you think you really have it down, you're kind of committed to a change. And I think technical SEO and UX really do go hand in hand. Even just, I know it's not like, off-page optimizations and stuff like that, or outreach, things that are really technical, or even diving into like crawlability, but just basic stuff like header tags and formatting and images on the page, as well as, just meta descriptions and things like that. It's really been shown, at least for my test, that that kind of quote unquote boring SEO, like the metadata, optimizing tags and whatnot, it does have a pretty big impact on click-through rates. So that kind of helps people understand what they're getting into when they're looking on SERPs, and then when they click over to your website. So you're kind of priming that relationship.
Sure. So you think there's an intersection, I mean, between, actual, ranking factors and search engine ranking factors and the actual user experience? I mean, I think we start to think about, how someone interacts with a page. I mean, obviously, we have ranking factors could be such as somebody just clicking from the search results and clicking onto a page and then having a bad user experience, and then essentially just clicking back. I mean, going back to search results. So certainly that's one possible, ranking factor that's been discussed over and over again. But where is this, intersection between actual ranking factors and, user experience?
Yeah. So Google really has the upper hand here because they can see exactly what people are doing from moment to moment. And I think where we as SEOs and marketers have to start is the end user and then work backwards. And considering that, search engine optimization in and of itself is not as important as people converting, it's a means to an end. So I think in a lot of ways, I was reading something yesterday about Google talking about, or Google Rep talking about, long clicks and short clicks and, time on page, and Google Analytics not really counting because not every page has it. But what I got out of that is that Google's main point in life is to get the right content to the right people at the right time. And that's where we as SEOs and even PPC and other mediums really work together. So I think that whenever I go in and look at metrics on a page, I'm looking at click-through rate, I'm looking at, the number of times that it showed with impressions in Google Search Console to how many times it was clicked, as well as in Google Analytics with what pages people went to, how long people are on those pages, and then, just other wrapping buttons and events or things like that, where you could really start seeing what people are doing on that page and then understanding what they want.
Sure. So, it comes down to, though, that real question is, how much does Google really know what people are doing on our page? Whether or not, they say they don't use, Google Analytics data. They say they don't, certainly if you're using Google Chrome, there could potentially be some information passed there. But, it really comes down to, that's the question. I mean, how, whether or not Google actually, Google has that information, and then whether or not they can actually use that user behavior on your site as ranking factor. Certainly, even if they do have information about just user data from I know that they can get access to router information, like if and all sorts of different information about which pages they view and how long they spend, but whether or not they're actually mousing, theoretically mousing over certain text on your page and reading it and so forth. I mean, what's your take on the question of whether or not Google actually uses that user behavior on your site as a ranking factor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to be upfront, I don't know all the factors that Google uses, so I think that was a great.
I don't think anybody really knows.
Yeah. Well, I guess from my experience, I've done a lot of research with like YouTube optimization and things like that, and I know that they really focus on time on page a couple of years ago when they were growing YouTube. So I can only assume that they're applying that same methodology to the general web, which they're able to control now, or they're not able to control that as much because they're not on YouTube like in their environment. But I do think that we know that Google takes into consideration location based. If you're using Android phones, they're collecting a lot of information about you there. So while that might not constitute 100% of the population, I still think you're looking at 50% of the people, using smartphones at least. And we know the kind of trends that are going with mobile versus desktop. And then on top of that, they're able to take into consideration time on page, maybe looking at scroll speed, other things like that. And even if you don't have Google Analytics installed on your site, you're probably using some other Google products that they're able to take and draw inferences from. So yeah, they might not be able to have the whole picture, but I think they have enough where they can start to understand what people want and how they're interacting with that content. So you can kind of piece that together and understand user experience from a whole.
Sure. So one of my takes actually is that that Google actually provides a lot of bandwidth, or has access to a lot of just overall general internet bandwidth, and and whether even if it's people are going using the Bing search engine and where they're clicking. Mm-hmm. But because of the fact that Google has the access to Android, and they have the access to their own data centers, and and basically the higher level, and of just where people are going on the internet and what pages they're going and how they're interacting. I think that they don't necessarily have to have the actual access to our web data with like with Google Analytics or Google AdSense code or anything like that. I think there's we have to understand that they can look at that, look at where people are going and how much time they're spending on a page based on either information from the Android operating system, or actually from just internet traffic in general. And I'm not sure if really the algorithm is actually looking at I know that the actual clicks and mouse overs and that kind of stuff. But I think that there's I think there are some things though that even anything from our log file data to our even just Google Analytics data that and information from Google Tag Manager and whatever analytics we're using, whether it's Adobe. I think there are some things that we can measure, so and try and increase provide a better user experience. Obviously, one thing that comes to mind in particular that I try and look at when I'm doing SEO audits is actually where people where people are clicking and what links they're clicking. If you think about a site that might have 10 links, 10 let's say 10 links on a sidebar or 10 links in the navigation, and there's a certain order that particular those links are in. There's and you might have them in alphabetical order, or you might have them in it could be a list of your services, and just the basic Google Analytics in-page analytics, you could actually see that which of those 10 services people are clicking on more. And so obviously if they're clicking on the third one in the list more often, then providing a better user experience, you'd want to take that third item in your navigation and move that maybe to the top of the list because people are clicking more often. So what are the things, in your mind or in your experience, what are the things that SEOs, like that we can measure?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why this stuff's really exciting. Makes me wish I would have studied a little bit harder in statistics so I could kind of understand all those bigger concepts.
Sure.
But from my experience, I always just take that mentality of always try to push towards a sale. So if there's a page that's getting more traffic, or e-commerce page, if you're having a category page and it's showing really high value, maybe pushing that to the top if it's not on there. That's from navigation, but you can take that same approach to how you design an actual page. So I usually like to think of it, when I started dating my wife, we're married now, but we first started, I talked to her about different things at different points of our relationship. So when I first met her, I just didn't dive into like, hey, let's get a shared bank account, let's buy a house. That's a lot to take on, right? So I kind of do that the same from top to bottom, left to right, and kind of break up the pages in a similar format where you start off at the top, it's just more general stuff, assuming that maybe people are coming to you through organic or another blog post, and maybe they came over to your commercial page or sales page. And then, you have a call to action, like you ready to, get a free trial. And if they keep scrolling past that, you could assume that they're not ready. So at that point, you could be providing more information like, why is this good for you? What problems do you have? How do we address those problems? Comparison chart later down or whatever. So I don't think it's really a relationship that's built on one, hey, let's go do something. As you're working with the audience, it's more of building that story and addressing needs through user experience, because people will tell you where they're at if they're ready to purchase based on where they go and what they do.
Sure. So can you talk a little bit about, user behavior and UX and how these are related? I mean, some people actually, may be confused about what user behavior is on a site and how that is different than user experience.
Mm-hmm. So are you just more asking about how those terms differ, or how those interact?
Let's talk just real quickly about how those terms differ. What's the difference between actual user behavior and user experience? Because those, I know people do get. I know it's kind of confusing. They both have user and
Yeah. As is typical with SEO and other things like that, it's just using the same terms in different ways. I think user behavior is how people work within your brand, and then user experience is the tools that you set up to help people understand your brand. And obviously those aren't perfect definitions, but for me and our company, my wife and I, we sat down and we saw that there was a problem on how people were behaving with our site. I'm a copywriter at heart, so I just love making copy and doing keyword research. And it was ranking, but it looked like garbage and nobody was converting. So that was a behavior that I did not want, to have. I like getting leads and working with customers, things like that. So we went ahead and addressed that by looking at how people were experiencing our site. And I realized that my assumptions that if you rank, you can bank, that wasn't true. You can, your pages can rank, but the experience will dictate kind of that behavior. So I think they do go hand in hand, and one is kind of the cause and effect of the other. So that's kind of how I look at it.
So Google asked us, and what we should be looking for is additionally creating content for search intent. I mean, essentially, that they're asking us when we create content to kind of optimize for different scenarios. Like, there may be pages that we create that are informational, and there might be other pages that we create that are strictly commercial, transactional, or local. How do you think SEOs should measure a website's ability to meet a user's search intent?
Mhm. Yeah, so that's a great question. That's kind of the bottom line, is just thinking about how people experience content differently. And I
Hmm.
think it really starts with the content strategy. So the end result of a sales page is to get people to buy, whereas the end result of an information page is to provide people with the information that they need to feel comfortable with your brand and understand that they're probably researching more at that time. So I don't really like to think of a traditional funnel because people could come in at any point. But as you try to mature that relationship with the audience, I think that different content works at different points. White papers are really good for kind of the purchase stage, where if someone's going to sit down and read a 15-page white paper or case studies, that's really good. Whereas informational would be more like, what are the general problems that people in your industry are experiencing? And then
Hmm.
that gives you a really good hook, line, and sinker because people are searching for that, like, I have this problem, whatever it might be. And then from there, you can say that, hey, I know you have this problem. Let me explain to you that other people are just like you and have the same problem. And then you kind of build up that relationship and walk down that road with them.
Sure. I mean, I've always been really a proponent of providing people as much information as possible and educating them. And I think that ultimately customers who have just more information are better informed. They're better customers. They're better clients and so forth. So what other aspects of UX really can be improved in order to improve a page's SEO?
Mm-hmm. So we talked about the kind of like the low-hanging opportunities, such as title tags and descriptions, things like that, and then also formatting your content properly with H2 tags, things like that. But I think even moving away from just those on-page kind of code-bearing options is also including, and this is something that we did on our site, is we started including FAQ section at the bottom of every page. So there'd be 6 to 8, just because I have OCD and I like things to balance properly. So we use numbers, but we would have the question, and then that would be, you would have an answer right under it. So those are giving exact match long tail keywords that from our research we found that people were actually looking for. So again, if by the time you get to the bottom of the page, if you still haven't clicked, get your consultation or talk to our team at that point, I'm just kind of throwing everything out there and saying, these are every question you could possibly have based on research that I've done.
Sure.
And then, just in the same way, on some local pages that we have, like for Orlando-based services that we offer, we started using, I started doing outbound links to local services for small business owners. So stuff from UCF, the University of Central Florida, which is here in town. They have a lot of stuff for entrepreneurs. So, financing or whatever else it might be. And I think that just goes to show that, hey, I know you're in Orlando and I know you're a small business owner because you've read this far, just to build a little bit more rapport with you. And whether you want to buy with me or not, it's, I don't really care. Like, just, I want to help you out. So I'm trying to build that relationship. So that's just another way where I think looking at the user experience first. Do those outbound links help me with Google? I don't know. I've read a lot from like Ron Fishkin from, he's done a lot with like outbound links and stuff. But I mean, for me, it's just, if I was in this person's shoes, a small business owner, I'd want that information. So I want to be the person to give it to them.
So you mentioned that to me, earlier that you launched an update on your site. I mean, what were the user experience problems you were focusing on? I mean, I know that were those like adding those mini FAQ sections, was that in addition to your site recently, or have you had those for a while?
Yeah, so I kind of had them. I'm really bad at design. I don't get colors. Like, colors just don't make sense to me, like the whole emotional things that colors bring about. And everything that I design just looks like a kindergartner like drawing it with a pencil, doing stick figures. So we worked with a really talented designer here in Orlando, and she put together mock-ups for us. And then we worked with a really good developer, and paid them to do their thing and be professional with it. And by doing that, I was able to work with the designer and say, hey, this is kind of the gift. Like at Christmas, like when you have a gift, you have to have a package that fits it. I kind of gave the parameters and said, hey, this is kind of what I want to have on the page. And then she went ahead and did an awesome job with creating the different divs and other things like that, whatever designers do. And then the developer went ahead and took that PSD or whatever it was, and then actually made it look awesome. So so it really was not like an update. I think it was pretty much an overhaul, just because what I had before was just not cutting it.
Sure. So what did you so did you actually look at things like when you redesigned, looked at page load speed and some other issues as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a big thing for us because we're running PPC, so I wanted the pages to load really quick, along with having easy share on specific pages, so having that functionality baked in. And then we also looked at user path and Google Analytics to see where people were going, and then what path they were going, and then optimizing those with internal link structure and other things like that. So we're seeing a lot of really good leads coming in right now. Was it because I added FAQ section? Probably. Was it because I improved the internal structure of the architecture of the site? Probably. Was it that we rewrote all the copy and redid a lot of stuff on the back end? I mean, likely. I don't know which one it was, but it's working, so I guess I'm pretty happy with that.
Sure. I mean, I guess the next step would be actually just to do, a little bit more specific analysis as far as, looking at sessions and bounce rate and, which pages and, time on site and so forth. And, those are, basically compare the before and after and see if there's any, what really stands out as far as what changed the most, typically. On a high level, what we would do is we would say, okay, well, let's take, it's been, say we launched the new site April 1st. We have April 1st to the 24th, and then we have, 24 days of data now. And so then we would compare that period with the previous period and just and start to dig in that way, on analytics. And at a really high level, that's how you would compare whether the site's doing better or worse in certain areas. And then certainly the more days that go on, after you'll have a little bit more data. After 3 months, you'll have that data and you'll be able to compare. And there obviously is, any kind of, site migration like that. There's any, or change, or up, to your UX and so forth. That's a way to kind of, start digging in to the data.
Yeah, no, that's good points.
Click-through ratio. Have you noticed any kind of changes? I know you mentioned some PPC. So have you changed maybe the landing pages that you're sending people to as a result of this new, the new design on your site?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or are you sending them to the same, kind of the same URLs as you did before?
Yeah. So a couple of things is just from like a holistic standpoint, the site's only been up for about a month, so pretty close to what the example was that you gave, which was great. I really like that, like going back in and double checking and making sure it's not just magic behind the scenes. But I've seen a significant bump up in overall click-through rate, things like that. We've seen about a 12% increase in sessions, and bounce rate is down a couple percentage points from just the holistic standpoint. Haven't really dug in yet to do the kind of deep dive like you were talking about, but that's something I want to be doing this weekend kind of got me motivated here to talk about that.
Yep.
Even just month over month, just looking at Google Search Console, I've seen a 200% increase in just impression, and clicks are going up as well. So, maybe the site was doing really bad before and now it's doing okay, or it was doing really well and now it's doing even better. I don't, either way, it's just good to see that, this stuff actually works, and like you can actually track it, which is kind of exciting. And then, I've really been putting a lot of effort into local SEO, so local pages, and I've been seeing that's doing really well. I've just been kind of digging in and being really focused on local SEO. It's kind of like the Wild West of, the industry right now, and I'm really enjoying playing around with it. So I think our PPC is on the same track as that, kind of improving the pages that we go to, making sure that the quality rank is there, and making sure that everything's working together.
Here you mentioned local SEO. So are you creating content? And obviously you're in the Orlando area, right? So are you focused on sort of Orlando phrases, or or are you going after cities kind of outside of Orlando, or local neighborhoods or anything like that? Or are you focused more on, say Orlando in particular?
Yeah. So my approach to that's kind of been evolving. I started with just really basic, creating a virtual silo of just like local-based services that I offer. So when people type it in, it's not actually going to show up on the search bar of the main navigation, but it'll show up in Google and SERPs and things like that. But then outside of that, also been focusing on, I haven't been creating pages like Winter Garden, Windermere, those kind of things, because I think that gets a little repetitive. But but looking more at starting with, again, the audience and then working backwards. So if I'm finding a lot of lawyers in Winter Park, maybe creating some content around that, or looking at there's a lot of demographic information from that the state puts out in the national government, where you can actually find pockets of specific industries. And then maybe starting with that and then working backwards, figuring out what those people are asking. And then it's really just kind of rinse and repeat in a way where, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, and just play around with that and test it.
Sure. We have a couple, I guess about 5 minutes left. So let's talk a little bit about some favorite technical tricks and technical SEO, and do you have any kind of, I guess, favorite technical tricks that you like to kind of reveal, if you will?
I do. I usually focus. Probably not as adept at technical SEO as you are, Bill, but I definitely like to more focus on kind of on-page optimization. Like breaking up content, figuring out long-tail keywords, focusing on those. I don't really deal as much with the Google bots and stuff like that. That's really for those hardcore developers and that different technical SEO framework. So I usually like to break up content and just really focus on kind of the synonyms for different keywords and long-tail keywords, and working with that.
Yep. So I'm going to throw something out there. There's a couple phrases that are kind of my prized keywords. Obviously they're not one-word phrases, but it could be 3 or 4 word phrases that I just personally know that when somebody searches for that phrase, that even though there's only 20 to 30 searches a month for that keyword, I know that because I'm ranking second, third, or fourth or something for that it brings me leads, and I actually get really good, a good amount of business from those particular keywords. And it's interesting to note that, for a couple of those phrases in particular, that it's actually the same, 3 or 4 people who are ranking, obviously, and there's one particular phrase that's a 3-word phrase that, means a lot to me, and because it brings me a lot of a lot of business. And I'm ranking, on certain days I'll be ranking second, maybe I'll rank, maybe it'll bump down to third or fourth. And what I find is that it's actually the same, the same 4 or 5 people who are ranking, and we kind of change our, we may change or tweak our page or something like that.
Do the dance.
So I guess not really, technical tricks, but I actually monitor changes to those other, those 3 or 4 other pages. So if if the guy is ranking second or third, changes something on his page, I'll get an alert that says, hey, so-and-so changed something on their page. And then obviously I have my, there are some SEO tools out there that allow you to kind of basically compare the pages in particular. So, one page might have, 3 H2 tags and one H3 tags, and and they might be putting the keyword in bold or something like that, or and those technical things. And then there's ways to track those. So I have my top, for that particular keyword, I have my top 5 or 6 people who are pages that some days I'm second, or and maybe I'm third, and then if I go in and I tweak my page based on what the others have tweaked on their pages, then I'm able to actually go back from, if I drop down to third or fourth, I can go back up to second, for example, just by making that change, and then making a change. And then luckily now you can actually use the URL inspector tool in Google Search Console and actually put that, once you've made the change, and cleared the cache and so forth on your page, you can go in the URL inspector tool and in Google Search Console and ask them to recrawl it. And literally, I have seen within 15 minutes, 10 minutes, I'm going back, based on the change, I've gone from, say, ranking fourth to jumping up to second.
That's gold, man.
So,
That's good.
there are, luckily, it kind of makes SEO fun again. I mean, based on that.
Yeah.
So, let's follow. We don't have too much time. We got about a minute left. Any technical questions that you just get asked all the time, over and over, that you are not really very fond of? I guess your least favorite technical question?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people just get lost in the numbers. They think that more search volume is better. So a lot of people like to try to rank, but it's really about getting the right people to your site at the right time to look at the right content.
Exactly.
So so exactly what you were saying. I found that it's just better to really focus on the long tail keywords instead of trying to fight with the more general non-intent keywords. And then building out thematic clusters. A lot of times people are always just asking about LSI keywords. It's terms that just don't really mean anything in SEO terms. So I think it's good to really focus on the underlying rich snippets and things. But in terms of search volume, I think it's more important to really look at getting the right people to your site, and then that's going to have less competition, and that goes with local SEO too. People get mad if they're not getting thousands of people in traffic. I'm like, yo, you live in a town with 500 people, you're not going to be getting a bunch. So, just looking at that and figuring out the industry, I think, is most important, rather than looking at just how many people could I get to the site. Are those going to be people who are willing to buy from you or engage with you?
All right, sounds great. So we're gonna wrap it up right now, and this has been the OnCrawl SEO in Orbit, and we have another next episode coming up. You can see the full agenda at www.oncrawl.com/SEO in Orbit. Thanks again, Chris, and Chris and Bill, and this has been a great time, and let's do this definitely again.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Bill.
Thanks, Chris.
See ya.